Have you ever tried working some different things into your family's diet and it didn't go so well? Maybe it was hard for you as the parent to prepare new foods. Maybe the kids complained. Maybe you were overwhelmed with options and changes. I know I've been there. During the years we were foster parents, we had kids come in and out of our home that had never really eaten vegetables, never gone a day without processed food, and had some very strong feelings about what they wanted to eat and did not want to eat. We had a lot of changes to navigate. That's why I appreciate Janine's realistic and down-to-earth approach to nutrient-dense eating. Janine Farzin, my guest on this episode, has successfully switched her family's diet with ancestral foods as its foundation. We talk about why that can be hard, people's misunderstandings, how to make the changes sustainable and practical, all the real-life things that you need to know if you want to make some changes to your family's diet. Healthy living is all about making lifelong healthy changes over time that improve your well-being. And I just soaked up all the tips that Janine offered about helping my family get more nutrient-dense foods in our diet. Enjoy the show. Welcome to the Daily Wellness Podcast, where you can learn about healthy living and be inspired to take the next step in your wellness journey. Hey everyone, I have Janine Farzin with me today. I'm so excited that you joined us. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Melissa.
Yeah, I've been following you on Instagram as my inspiration. I told my niece, who's also been on a health journey of sorts, we get together and talk all things health and wellness, like we have coffee and then we talk about all the nerdy health and wellness things. And I told her I was following you on Instagram and just wanting to see what you are doing and try to normalize it in my own brain. I was like, if I see it often enough, I'm going to think it's that this is the way to live and I can do this.
Oh.
And so you've been very inspiring to me.
Yeah, actually, I got into a little I was corrected because I always thought that many years ago I read, it was actually a Psychology Today article. I looked it up specifically and it was, 15 to 20 exposures to a certain, a new food or something to kind of familiarize with yourself with a new flavor. I know that kimchi is our world is so small now that things are different cultures.
Yeah.
We have curries and we have sushi and we have kimchi and all this stuff. But imagine if you'd never had kimchi or Vegemite or something before and you moved to that country and all of a sudden you're exposed to it over and over and over. At first, it would be really overwhelming. But after some time of living in that space and being normalized to it, you would be like, oh, this food is it wouldn't be such an offense to your taste buds,
That's true.
And so I always thought 15 to 20 times. And then my friend, Christine Muldoon, a nurse, the little, she was like, no, actually it's 15 to 20 exposures and every exposure counts. So even if the kids, if you were talking about maybe picky eating or something with kids, it's actually if they have more exposures, if they're actually cooking the food and they're working with the vegetables, say they don't like something like carrots or potatoes or whatever it is, when they have the opportunity to work with it, all those exposures count. And so I actually think there's something to be said or just surrounding yourself in an environment. If you're just watching, if I'm posting about organ meats every day and being yeah, my family's eating this, whatever, then after a certain amount of time, at some point, you're wait, why did I think that was kind of weird, right? I do think there is something to be said for the exposure.
Yeah. I
also think there's something to be said for the flavors.
Yeah, that's a great clarification because I do think that way with my kids. I'm if I'm serving a new food or trying a new vegetable or something, I'm well, they might not like it the first time. I'll just try again. So why not think the same for us, right?
Yeah. And Christine's always telling me, or I've heard her say a couple different times that most parents quit too soon. They'll stop after 3 exposures or maybe even 6 exposures. And they'll be oh, this was a failure. But actually, you're only not even a third of the way there, if you've had that many exposures. So it actually takes so much more. And so just finding a way to just bring it into our everyday life. And
yes,
I don't know, maybe that was part of the reason. I had definitely heard, I did not eat organ meats when I was growing up. I totally grew up, I wouldn't say standard American diet, but just in some sense, standard American diet.
Yeah.
We cooked a lot of things from scratch. We had a big garden. I grew up in Northern California, but we did it was the cereal boxes and the back of the cereal box and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Well, we might be getting ahead of ourselves. So let's tell people about who you are and kind of your own health journey.
Sure. Okay. So, I'm so grateful to be here. Where do I even begin? I actually have a background in industrial engineering. So, and so I kind of actually, when I learned that nutrients matter, when I learned like just that, when I read Nutrition and Physical Degeneration, which I did at some point, I read Weston Price's landmark book. A friend of mine had recommended it to me. I never heard of it. I checked it out at the library. I read it cover to cover, and I was like, whoa, this, like, we're onto something here. I actually, like, I came to it from this idea of nutrient density, because I really like love the idea of an optimization problem. Like, I kind of have a technical mind, an analytical mind, and so I've always kind of compartmentalized things. Like, I have a lot of like frameworks for the way I think about how to cook organ meats or how to overcome challenges with organ meats, stuff like that. We could also talk about some of those later. I was kind of like putting those things together. But when I read that book, I was like, oh my gosh, nutrients matter. And like, here's the problem. We only get so many calories in a day. How can we optimize or maximize the number of nutrients that we're consuming? Like, we think that we can eat so much, right? Like, we all eat too much and all this stuff. But like, at some point, you're maxed out on calories. Like, you can't take another bite. We've all been at this place in a meal. Like, you're done. And so if that is all the food you can eat in a day, how can you get the most nutrients as possible? And I realized from reading this book that it was organ meats, like that they were the differentiator. That, you know, he went all over the world, he studied all these different cultures, and and so it was organ meats that were truly the most nutrient dense foods on the planet, and that many, not just liver, which is the most nutrient dense food, but that a lot of the organ meats had special properties and special nutrients that could really support all the health. And it's kind of funny because back in school, I had actually done a project like many years ago in college where we had to go to McDonald's and get the menu and kind of analyze it, like go through and look at all the nutritional values for each of the categories of the RDA, which are like not all the nutrients, but it's like, you know, vitamin C and all the B vitamins and like calcium, you know, like kind of the big hitters there. That the USDA tracks. So they're required to publish that. And then the RDA recommended daily allowance. I think they have new dates for those now, but that's what it was at that time. So we had to figure out how to meet the RDA at McDonald's using for the lowest cost. So like, what was the cheapest thing that you could, like, what would be your best choice, like the cheapest thing to buy to meet all of your needs off the menu at McDonald's. And so actually it was like crazy, because when I read Nutrition and Physical, I always liked those problems. Like I love that problem set. There were all sorts of optimization problems like that in my schooling and then in my life up until just as I worked in transportation for 15 or more years. And so the whole thing was an optimization problem. But when I realized, like when I read that book, I was like, oh my gosh, this is real life. And this really is like an actual optimization problem. So every day, how can we optimize the nutrients that we are consuming? And every road like led to organ meats and raw meat and raw milk, like all the animal products, and but really especially the organ meats. And I was like, okay, this is it. We're all in.
Yeah, I just love that story. And I know there's lots of pieces to your story that really led you to where you are today and make you, like, I can tell you just enjoy it so much, like helping other people on this journey of optimizing nutrition in their life. And you just keep showing up in different spheres. I found you, I think, on Instagram, and then I follow Weston A. Price too. And so I saw some things that you did with them. And then I interviewed Christine Muldoon, and she's like, you need to interview Janine. And so everybody's talking about you, Janine.
Oh, thanks. That's so funny. Yeah. Sometimes I totally feel like it's like this weird like path, because my mom was she cooked everything from scratch, and she was like really into just feeding people and like making beautiful meals. And there were a lot of dinner parties when I was growing up. And then my dad was also an engineer and had a very analytical mind and kind of was like business oriented. And like, I often feel like just like combining like the optimization problem of nutrient density with like creating meals that like look good and are appealing, because I have kind of come to the belief over time that the most sustainable way to keep like these nutrient dense foods in your life is to create meals that you love. If you create meals that taste good and that your family loves, it's really easy to come back to them over and over and over again, because your kids are asking for them, because everyone likes them, because they're like, they become comfort foods in your home. Like, that is the most sustainable way to keep these foods in your life on a regular basis. Like, you can take the pills, but like at some point, I mean, it's like a fistful, right? Like 1 ounce of liver is like a fistful of supplements. And if you're in the market of taking supplements, that's probably not the only supplement you're taking. So, I mean, it's like literally like we've definitely been through the fistful of pills phases of our life. And like that, like doing that to your kids, and like, it's a lot. And I'm not saying that there isn't a time and place. Like, there are definitely, I still get cold sores when I'm stressed out, and like I will try to like change my diet to, you know, food as medicine to address that, but I will also take a lysine. Like, we still have like some things in our cupboard, but the funny thing is that we don't take pills every day. We don't take them very often at all, actually. We just listen to our body, use food as medicine, focus on the nutrient-dense foods, and then like let it roll. So that feels like such a liberating way. It also feels like something that we can take on the road with us. Like we walked out the door during COVID. We lived in downtown Chicago, and it felt like the city was just like, the tension was so thick you could cut it with a knife. We felt really limited. We had our 4 kids at home. We were not homeschooling at that time. So that was a really big shift for us to have everyone in the walls of our house, including my husband, who was working from home, my downstairs neighbors who were also working from home, texting me like every 5 minutes, like nowhere to take the kids. The parks were closed. The beaches were closed. The lakefront was closed. Like it was all over, right? There was nowhere to go. And so we just like took the show on the road. We were like, let's just experiment, get out of town for a week. And we basically never went home. And so, I didn't have, a box of pills with me, but what I did have was like grocery stores all along the way. And it wasn't the quality of food that we were used to consuming. We had a lot of farmer relationships in Chicago, but you can buy organic, pastured, or maybe not pastured, you can buy organic chicken livers at Whole Foods, and you can buy beef liver at Safeway at, which is Bonds, it's like a major supermarket chain, West Coast and Safeway, but you can just buy these foods and then you could just make dinner, like the same dinner that we always ate. So then I could just prepare these dishes in any Airbnb, and we were still getting, we still had our same routine of like what we eat on a regular basis, and it wasn't exactly the same quality, but I mean, that didn't like change the performance of the food, like how it made us feel, right? Like we were still thriving and based up to our routine, and it was really easy to take with us. And so that was a liberating experience as well. Just like we don't need all that stuff. Like we just need each other at like a grocery store. I mean, I don't want to rely on grocery stores and like the industrial food system in general. Yeah, it's like kind of a different conversation, but it's totally available to us wherever we go. So yeah, sure. Once you know how to make meals that you love, like my kids still love, a liver piccata with, lemon juice and parsley. Like it's easy and it's simple, and we can put it together anywhere. So
yeah, I love that. I have so many questions. Since you're kind of talking about your health journey and your life as a mom, can I just ask you as an overall thought about health and healthy living as a mom, and the changes that you've made, not just in your diet, but in your lifestyle, really, like through all of that, would you say now are kind of the pillars of health that you live by in your family? Like, I'm just curious, as a mom leading your family through this health journey too, what kind of values are you trying to like instill in them as like, these are the things we're really going to focus on, guys?
There's probably 2 things. I think that the most important thing for our health journey and like for our journey through life period is actually creating an environment in our life where we have enough space and quiet to just listen, because the answer is not the same every day. In fact, it might be different from this morning to tonight. But if I have enough like wherewithal and practice pausing, then I'm able to like tap into my own inner knowing a lot faster. I mean, this is like if you're at the playground with your kids and you're like have a ton of energy and you're feeling really well resourced, like you'll let them climb to like the top of like the highest, scariest thing, or climb like the highest tree in the park. And it's like no big deal. But like there's days where you're like run down and stressed out. And like if they're doing those kinds of same exact behavior, you're like, oh my God, I can't handle it. Like if we had to go to the hospital today, like I could not do it. Like, and so like so I kind of feel like there are no hard and fast rules. It's really just how I'm feeling. Like how well resourced I am like dictates like really the weather of our family and like how much leeway they have and like what they're allowed to do. That's just at the playground, for example, or like playing out in the woods. But I think that that's like also resonant with our health journey. It's really just like me listening to myself, because what I need is like movement. I need to work out every day. I need to like get outside. I need good sleep. But actually some days what I need to do is like not sleep at all and like finish something that like is like a hard, like a burning passion of mine, or like something I really care about, or something I really want to put out in the world. Or it's, supporting somebody in my family, like doing some work, like if, somebody in our, extended families, like asking for help with something that's personal to them, and like, staying up late. Like, so actually it's like none of those rules. It's actually just having enough capacity to practice and capacity to like listen and to respond to like whatever's in front of me. Because it's not.
So you're trying to teach your kids to listen to themselves.
Definitely. And I also like feel very strongly that, that what we believe matters. And so if our beliefs are rigid, like that's fine, but like that's important to us. But like, so for us, we do have a family belief that like nutrients matter, nutrition matters, and all that stuff. But I try to point out a lot of situations around us where there's people in very different situations. Like maybe both the parents have to work full time, and they're really, they don't have the time to do all the cooking at home, and the things that the choices that we make, but that they are making other investments in their family in different ways that can be very satisfying. Or maybe there are definitely family friends that we have, and I believe that their faith carries them. They have very different diets than we do, but they have a very like robust and energetic, like just relationship with the world, and like carry an amazing, loving personality. And there's something to be said for like all these different lifestyles. And I do believe that beliefs matter. And so we can stick to our values and like do the things that are resonant to us, but like that doesn't mean that it's the right thing for everybody else. The same way that what I need to do today to care for myself and my family could change on a day-to-day basis, like it looks different for other people as well. So I don't know, that's kind of my take of
I love that. Yeah, thanks for sharing. As far as your like value of eating nutrient-dense foods, like what exactly does that look like? What did you kind of learn in your journey?
Well, yeah, that's a really good question. I think that, I read Weston Price, and after I read that, I actually read a lot of the nutritional pioneers. I went back and just started reading like old literature about vitamin C, early studies on vitamin C, and early study of Francis Pottinger, and just like a lot of, basically the Price Pottinger Foundation is the publisher of these works, keeping them in print, and they have an entire library of literature. And so I kind of did a deep dive into a lot of their works, and just learned a lot about nutrition in general. And I tried to take a step back. Again, like my analytical mind is always trying to make frameworks for things, and I tried to like distill them, kind of what I determined to be the critical elements. Because the thing is that Weston Price is all around the world. He looked at these people. So people in the South Pacific Islands were eating like tropical fruits and a lot of seafoods, and people in the North Canadian tundra didn't have access to plant foods for 9 months out of the year, and they only had access to animal foods for 3/4 of their year. And so they had their diets looked very different. And of course, some people had grains and some people had dairy and other people didn't. So it wasn't any of those things that were linking all these cultures. Like, in my opinion, the thing that was linking those cultures were these sacred foods. And so that was like that was the differentiator. That was the through line that went through all of this. And it was actually something that really resonated with me, because both my husband and I can see our immigrant generation. And so I was like, wait, this is the way my grandparents ate. This is the way my in-laws ate when they, before they came to the US. And like, it's just, so I was like, okay, like this seems like I have a lot of validation for this, but, or like it resonated with me from that sense, because I could see that these people, like my grandma lived to 101 and his grandfather lived to 98. Like these people had like, and they were well, like his grandfather I met his grandfather who had traveled from Iran, like when we were in college, who was staying at their home in Columbus, Ohio. Right. And so I don't know. So like I had exposure to people that I felt like, oh my gosh, they had actually lived this way. Like my father-in-law never had access to pasteurized milk until he went to college in Tehran, like from the small town he grew up in. Right. So he actually has this really funny story about this cousin that had tuberculosis that had to come from the country to like stay with them because they were in a slightly bigger town where there was medical care. And he was like, oh, it was such a risk because we all could have gotten tuberculosis, and none of the 6 kids in his home did. But I just think that's such an interesting story because,
It is.
when you read the works of like Weston Price and you read the works of Francis Pottinger, who spent his life basically, building and working in tuberculosis, like sanatoriums after the death of his wife from tuberculosis, like that really, like you can see that there's a nutritional component to these illnesses. And of course, his family was like thriving nutritionally. So it's not surprising that any of his siblings never, got tuberculosis, even though somebody with it was living in their house for, a couple of months. And he's always like, oh, it was so risky. And I'm like, yeah, but you guys were drinking all the raw milk and had good access to these pastured animals that like, right. Anyway, it's like, so it's just so interesting to me to hear their stories and also their take on it, which is like a very standard take, right? That pasteurized milk actually is better. Like we came to the United States, we got these better foods. Why would you consider going backwards in time? Kind of. But anyway, but I had had exposure to those things. And so I thought they were valuable. What I did is I distilled what I believe to be the core elements of it. And I created a weekly meal schedule. And so I was like, well, whatever we eat, like whatever's fresh at the farmer's market, we can get all that. But we're going to have organ meats on Monday nights because we're going to start our week with the most nutrient-dense foods. Tuesday was always kind of like hit or miss because that used to be a really long work day for me. It was leftovers from the weekend. Wednesday would always be soup with a homemade bone broth. So like kind of enforced and guaranteed that we would be in the habit of having that in the house at all times. Thursday was always going to be raw meat, like not necessarily as a meal, but as an appetizer. Although it could be, because I really discerned that every culture ate raw animal foods. This was completely foreign to me before I got into this. Like my family grew up like all well-cooked meats, like not even rare steak. like a cooked steak on the grill. So that was new to me, but I was like, this is one of the threads that goes through all the cultures. And then seafood, right? Weston Price like really found that cultures that had access to seafood because they're such mineral rich foods. So I put those on our weekly dinner calendar, and then they could go like any way. But that was the thread that held our family together, because I wanted to find a way to make our, like, I didn't want to lose our values. Like I was like, this is a value set and I want to instill it in our family. So by creating like a dinner schedule, we can include the most important foods every week. And then whatever happens around that, fine. That kind of gives me the freedom to be like, even with these, you know, the weeks that we end up like at grandparents' house or something and the diet looks really different. It's like, okay, well, we have these pillars. So
Yeah, that's so smart to just put your values into the menu plan.
yeah. And then we were able to take it on the road with us. Like I said, when we left town, like we were still, it was like, I was buying bone broth, I was buying like different quality, like organ meats than I had in the past, but we just kept eating those same foods.
Mm-hmm.
And then as we, you know, kind of settled and we found farmers again and everything, we just brought back all the same thing. So, it, you know, I could even buy, you know, like the highest quality meat I could find, or like find one local farmer that just had red meat, not necessarily organ meat or something. And I could freeze that and I could still do like a raw meat meal, or we could just have rare steak instead of like cooking it all the way through. There was a lot of options. And we could just stick to our kind of weekly meal plan of like the highest nutrient dense food, like that were consistent with our values, like the way that we live.
Yeah.
So.
And how easy was that for you to implement, like as a mom, just trying to learn new cooking techniques and all of that, and then serving it?
Yeah, it's sufficiently like loose that, I mean, I had to like figure out how to find raw meats that I could serve as appetizers or as meals. Like that was really foreign to me. But with just a little bit of research, I realized that, you know, most cultures in the world have these foods, and we can lean on those. It's actually like not, you know, like a rare steak is not as uncommon. Sushi is now super common. You know, things like carpaccio or tartare or pho, like these all traditionally were raw foods. So I don't know. I like it, not that hard. Like those, you know, that was kind of a tricky thing. But that was, even if I just served it as an appetizer, like we only had a small piece of raw meat, or I can just make hamburgers, and then like if the meat was previously frozen, just peel off little tiny meatballs and have like put out a little plate of those as an appetizer, and then still just have like cooked hamburgers for dinner. So I don't know. I felt like that was pretty easy. Organ meats was a lot to overcome. I did not know what I was doing. I did not know how to, like, I put that on the schedule and I had no idea what I was doing. Like bone broth, okay, I'll like put some bones in a pot, add water, like I'll make
me feel better.
Yeah, any soup I want, like that was fine. Seafood, I grew up eating tons of seafood. My grandparents are Portuguese. Grew up in Northern California. Like we had a very seafood heavy life. So loves all kinds of seafood, happy to do that. Yeah, so organ meats were like really the thing where I was like, I have no idea what I'm doing. I did not grow up eating this. And it was like not good at the beginning, but I was like, I'm just showing up every single week. This is the most important part of the week. Like we're doing it Monday night. We're gonna like do our best thing, you know, hardest thing first.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And how old were your kids when you started making all this?
Yeah, so they were really young. So they've really grown up with it. It's funny because at the time my son was like probably almost 3 and my daughter was like still an infant, less than 1. And I really felt like it was so late. You know, like I didn't know about these foods when I, you know, pre-conception, through pregnancy, like, you know, all the things I was like, oh, we missed so much. It's so late, all this stuff. But it's funny because now my oldest son is like turning 14 in a week or so. And, you know, now his whole life has been with these foods. It's such a different perspective.
Yeah.
He's just grown up with them. Yeah. So they were quite young. So they didn't know the difference. They just, like, that was what was served. And I was I'm kind of that like a little bit of an engineering personality. Like this is the way it is, right? Like math is like a very right or wrong kind of field. Science too. Like I stayed away from all the subjective things like literature and things like that. So I was like, no, this is the way it is. So like we didn't have snacks. Like you're going to eat this dinner. Like if you don't want the dinner, that's fine. Like you're not going to get dinner. Like there was no other food, stuff like that. So they grew up with these foods and like they just ate them.
Yeah. I'm a little bit like that too. My son didn't like the coconut flour muffins I made for breakfast this morning. I was like, well, that's what's for breakfast. So
yeah, no, totally. Like I'm not making, I mean, I can't be a starter cook. So it's just much. I mean, I always knew I wanted a big family and like 4 kids. I mean, this is also what I love about Sally Fallon, truth be told, like, you know, all these fad diets, like all the things, like if you put dinner on the table every night for 20 years, you'll know it has to be like comprehensive enough that everybody can find something they can eat. It just has to serve a whole family. So I think that's where Weston Price stuff come in. Like that's where we use like soaked and sprouted grains and sourdough and things like that. But it's not the foundation of our diet. I have to say in the early days, switching from the standard American diet to Weston Price, I like wore thin all the pages of like soaking and sprouting grains because I was trying to keep some consistency to like what we had been eating, which was so much like standard American diet, 12 servings of grain a day growing up was like the food pyramid. Like I really believed that was, I was trying to do the right thing. And I thought that was the right thing. I like saw that, I was told that was the right thing. Weston Price really opened my eyes because I was like, whoa, that's not the way my ancestors necessarily grew up, right? They grew up focusing on the fat, saving all the drippings, recognizing and valuing the animal foods. And so that really shifted my perspective. But I have to say in the beginning, I worked in the pages of like all the baking stuff because I was like, that's the way we can stay consistent. But I knew in my heart of hearts that was not what was going to make us healthy. It was not like soaking and sprouting grains. It was not eating ferments. It was going to be these animal foods that were really kind of overwhelming at the time.
Yeah, that's a really good point is, the things that are the most nutrient dense, like switching to those foods might be a little bit hard, but we can use those transitional foods to help us along the way. I think that's a really good point.
And they also round out a meal.
It's going to be so like cold turkey, but I know
it's just like one night a week. Like one night a week, I'm serving this. And the thing, it's not like I just put like an organ meat on the table and it's like, you have to eat this. Like we would also have like, sides of carrots or potatoes or rice or whatever the thing was. But I have to admit, I had some tricks up my sleeves. Like I would usually serve the meat and then be like, oh, I just put the carrots in the oven. Like they still have to bake for 25 minutes, like there's nothing else available. If you're hungry, you'll eat this first. But it was still a full meal, it's still like a dinner on like in the end. But I definitely was having some tricks to like,
I love that.
Like, yeah, I forget
all of us moms
on the day that I knew I was serving this like unfamiliar food that I wasn't really sure about. So they were really hungry when dinner time came, like things like that. But
yeah, we've all got our tricks.
Exactly. So, but yeah, when I first started cooking these foods, I didn't know what I was doing. And I basically cooked the same meal, which was this liver piccata dish with lemon juice and parsley. And I made the same liver dinner, beef liver. I just like went all in. I was like, we're not hiding these foods. We're going to like figure out how to do this. And I served that same meal every Monday night for months. That's how we started. And I was just like, I didn't know how to cook it. It tasted horrible. I was the most squeamish in my whole family. My kids were young. I don't know if they liked it or not, but they didn't know any different. My husband was like very generous. He just ate what I served. He doesn't, really think about it much. Like, oh, dinner, thank you. Like, so he was great. So blessed about that. And then I was the one that was like, oh my God, I can't eat these foods. My mom grew up eating organ meats. She was like, I'm going to save you from that awful experience. Like we had to eat all this weird stuff when I was growing up. I think that in a generation of assimilation, she really felt like the foods were one of the ways that made her family really different. She was also like the only non-native English speaker when she started school. And she was the oldest of all of her siblings. So her younger sisters were in school at the same time together and had a secret language kind of, but she was 4 years ahead of them and was the only person in her school that didn't speak English when she started. So it really felt like that was an isolating experience. She felt like they ate really weird foods at home. She had this story where they went back to Portugal when she was in high school and they stayed in this like really fancy hotel on the island of Madeira, which is where my grandma's from. And it was like a castle. It was like an old castle turned into a hotel. And then they went to go to like dinner, like the first day they were there in the restaurant, like of this castle. And there was brains on the menu, like 3 different ways. And my mom was like so mortified because she was like, I was sure that we had been eating this food because we were poor and weird. And here I was in this like really fancy place, like the fanciest place she'd ever been in her life. And there was brains on the menu. And she was like, people would pay for this? Like, who would eat this? She was like mortified. So like I had heard stories like that in my life, like way before I ever ate organ meats, right? Where she was just like, this stuff is horrible. It's so gross. Like, could you believe that? Like I went to this restaurant one time and they served it there. I couldn't believe it. Like my parents used to make me eat this stuff all the time. Like I would never I would never do that to you. And so, so we never ate. She definitely never cooked organ meats. Like even now she doesn't want them. She's like, I've had enough. I don't want that. When she comes to my house, she's like, you're not hiding anything in here. I'm like, no, I'm like, I feel very respectful. Like she's been doing her longer than I've been doing me. So like whatever she says goes, that's fine with me. But yeah, it's kind of funny that way. So she'd always talk about how gross liver was, how she hated it. So I was really like, I had to get over my own like social, cultural barriers. I would sit at the table last. I would like very methodically cut each piece. I would be starving. I wouldn't eat all day long, but I knew it was liver day because I was like, I have to eat this food and I don't know how I'm going to get it down. I would chew and chew and chew. And then I literally could not swallow it. It would be like mush in my mouth. It'd be like liquidy. I'd chew it so many times. I could not swallow it. And I started buying sparkling water. We never had like beverages in our house. And this was like even like long before kombucha and stuff. It's like over a decade ago. Yeah, and then I would like started buying sparkling water, and like on the nights we had liver, only on the nights we had organ meat, I would have serve sparkling water and like put like lemon in it or lime in it, and I would like swig it down. So I'd like chew and chew and chew, and I would like do this thing, and I would come to the table last. Like, everyone would be done. I didn't want my kids to see me like this because I didn't want them to like. They all thought it was normal. My husband was like generously just eating whatever I served, and I don't know. And maybe he had like very early exposures to these foods because he was actually born in Iran, and he had like exposures to like real foods and stuff like when he was very young. I have no idea. So, but for any whatever reason, he ate everything. He loved kidneys. He was happy to eat liver. It was all fine.
Amazing.
Even though I was cooking it horribly. Yeah. So but then I would like choke it down, and then like I do the next thing, like cut the next smallest bite, like chew. It would take me like an hour to eat this meal, like literally a 3-ounce serving of liver. It would take like, and I just be sitting at the table, like practically in the dark, like eating by myself. I have to do this. But what's fun, the 12 to 15 exposures or the 15 to 20 exposures, like it's something like right away, I knew I felt better when I ate it. But then over time, I actually was like, would look forward to that dinner. And then at some point I realized like it didn't need the sparkling water. It was just like something I enjoyed having with it. And then at some point I was like, wait, I love this dinner. It was like the best food. And I would like look forward to it. And then I was like eating it. But it took a few months for sure. And I also don't think I knew what I was doing. I was like cooking it very poorly in the beginning, but I was like, I'm just showing up here.
Yeah.
So it was definitely
that is so funny.
Yeah.
You were the one cooking it, and then you were the one having the hardest time.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. Like it was all and I was like really trying to just keep my own perceptions, like, you know, like just to hide that from the kids. Like I just really wanted them to think it was normal, like this was normal food. But I was so like grossed out. Like also because I had mostly been like a plant-based diet, not entirely. I mean, there were a couple of years where I was vegetarian mostly, but but I just like really didn't cook meat at home very much because I really like thought that like eating plants and grains was like the healthiest thing. So so I didn't have a lot of experience cooking meat yet at that point in my life. Mostly when I ate it out. Like even like a chicken breast. I don't know, like even so like a liver was like so like slimy and
you're on the
bloody. Oh my God. I was just like I would be like I could barely like get it out of the package. You know, I was like so squeamish. I'd be like put on my cutting board. Like, oh my God. But now I'm like, okay, whatever. It's just that now I like sometimes I look back and I'm like, wow. Now I do things like practically like blindfolded in the dark. Like late at night, I'm like, oh, I gotta prep this thing. I gotta do this thing. You know, I have to like make this pate so we can take it with us tomorrow. It's like picnic, you know, like wherever we're going, maybe the house, like kind of just not thinking twice about it. I'm like washing the tripe. I'm doing 20 other things at the same time, like talking to people, like whatever. Like I don't know, like things that like used to like really take me like a concentrated effort to overcome. You know, like I got to do this one task. It's like so overwhelming. Anyway, that's how it used to be, but it's definitely changed.
Yeah, it's interesting. It reminds me of I find myself telling my children often that, you know, think about what your body really needs, not just what it wants. And that's kind of what you were doing for yourself. And I just feel like I need to preach that to myself a little bit more.
Yeah. Well, also, I mean, absolutely. Weston Price has a quote like that somewhere, like using the foods that we need rather than only the foods we like or something, you know?
Yeah.
Like having them. And
you illustrated, I mean, your cravings do change after a while too. Once your body knows what it's like to eat nutrient-dense food and whole foods and real foods, then it feels good. And that's why you're going to start craving.
It's true. And like my son went to sleepaway camp the first time a couple of years ago, and he like came home and he was like, I picked him up and he was like, did you bring me a liver tonic? I picked him up at the airport and I was like, I did not bring a liver tonic to the airport. Like, no. He was like, oh, he's like, Mom, it's so bad. It's so bad. You got to make me some liver when I get home, Mom. It's just so funny. It's like things change over time, but like they know how they feel. I also feel like when people are getting a little bit like snappy and like not doing well, like emotionally in our home, it's like, whoa, you are growing a lot right now. Like, you need more nutrients. Like, what can we do for you? And you know, all the kids have different preferences for liver. Some prefer poultry, some prefer beef, but so you know, no one's ever like, they're not all happy. Like, no matter what I make, there's always somebody who's like, oh, why can't we have beef liver? And then like the people, oh, why can't we just have chicken liver? So no matter what I make,
family.
Totally. So there's always something like that, but if like some particular kids like not doing well, it's like, oh, we're going to have this meal that I know that they're going to eat up because like they really just kind of like get settled in their body. Yeah, there's a lot going on. They're growing so much.
True. Yeah. Can you give us an example, since you're kind of talking about liver, and I think that that's probably one of the most accessible like organ meats for people to purchase and maybe start out with. So what would, I guess I would love to know, like, what you would recommend for someone starting. Like, if my kids are I have 3 teenagers and a 9-year-old, so if they're a little bit older or, maybe just completely new to this, like what would you recommend for maybe some first introductions?
Yeah, that's so interesting. I mean, I feel like when your kids are older, if they're old enough that you can talk to them about the benefits of it and they warm up to that idea, like they have some logic. I know like the prefrontal cortex, not totally developed. So sometimes that's not getting through to them. But if they're like intrigued by it, then I think that engaging them and helping them like pick a recipe that sounds good to them and like trying it together has a lot of value, no matter what that is. And like whatever, like whatever the kind of flavor profiles your family likes. I tend to think that at that age, like when they're older, when kids are younger and they haven't had a lot of food outside the house, you can basically serve them anything you want and like say that this is what's for dinner and like that's the way it is. So you have a lot. So I would just like start cooking whole organ meats like liver or otherwise kidney, whatever, and just start serving it. I mean, like this is dinner, this is food. But I sometimes I think that actually for kids of that range, like the best thing might be to just start with blends, organ meat blends, because you don't really want to offend anybody's senses and like they can have strong flavors. And I think that if you, again, like that 15 to 20 exposures, like if you make blends and you don't add a lot of liver, then you add a little bit more, but it also has all these other flavorings, they're still getting like kind of the bitter flavor or the intensity like of minerally flavor, like because of all the nutrients in liver, it's so high in like sulfur compounds, which of course is great for DNA repair and stuff like that. It has so many minerals, which is amazing for all the enzyme production in our body, but of course it can be metallic. Like all these things, like they have these kind of offshoots, but I don't know. So I think that they'll get a little bit of flavor. And if you increase and add to like what the blend proportion that you're using, that over time they get used to that flavor, then they might be more amenable to just having it as a meal. But I also think that like once you get into older teenagers, you can actually talk to them, be like, this is super nutrient dense. I have no idea how to cook it. Like this is a huge experiment. I really want to try it. Some people say that they eat this food, they feel amazing. Like, are you willing to try it? Like, let's find a recipe together. You start to get into a new realm. I think that middle ground between young teens, especially like when they're having these huge growth spurts and they're very kind of unstable in some regard, like just going with things they know and doing organic blends or pates, Yeah. I think a pate can be really easy if you make a pate together. And if it's too intense, I think there's a lot of ways you can cover that, either with like jams. You can do a jam and a pate together. Also serving it with fruit. Like if you serve it on something sweet, like you can have a pate on apple slices or with like dipping grapes into it. So that can be like a sweetness that can balance the, like all the other like different flavors and intensity flavors.
Yeah. What is how significant is the nutrient benefit
for liver?
Yeah.
In particular.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess liver in particular, or organ meats in general, but like, okay, how worth it is this?
It's absolutely worth it. I mean, liver has all of the B vitamins and like the highest concentration you can find anywhere. Like, why do we care about B vitamins? Well, for a couple of reasons. First of all, they're water soluble. Same with the minerals. So what that means is that we do need to replace them really like every 72 hours at a minimum. Like these are something that are always turning over in our body. They're water soluble. So we're going, and eventually we're just going to pee them out. Right. And so we actually have to replace them all the time. And also B vitamins are absolutely essential for energy metabolism. So one of the they all work together, and it is so much more complex than this. But effectively, like one of the B vitamins is for carbohydrate metabolism. One of them is for fat metabolism. One of them is for protein metabolism and building neurotransmitters. One of them is for cell repair. So all this breaking down of carbohydrates and utilizing the energy that comes from that food or from fats, and these are the energy foods. So that is like one main source of energy, is like utilizing your B vitamins. So that's one thing. The other thing is that the thing about the organ meats that is so essential, and like same was true with minerals, highest levels of minerals, for all sorts of like off things, but like we're constantly replacing these. So very high need there. The reason that the ancestral people had this through line of organ meats as a differentiator was that they had the fat soluble vitamins. There really is like not much fat soluble vitamins in the muscle meat and things like that. And so the fat soluble vitamins are basically so powerful that they are often referred to as hormones in the medical literature. They're chemical messengers in their body. So they're improving self-communication. They're orchestrating how all the other nutrients are getting used. You can almost imagine, this is just an analogy, it's not exactly the way it functions, but like if you have a cell and it has all these arms off of it, and like the arm, it's like a fat has all these arms, and like that will carry all of the minerals. And nutrients. It's like we can't accurately use or take all the nutrients where they need without the fat soluble vitamins kind of dictating, like as the conductor of the symphony, telling the body how to use these nutrients. So that's super important. Another thing is like coenzyme Q10, for example, is very high in liver, it's very high in heart, and chicken livers in particular, but also beef liver. This is such a powerful antioxidant, and that antioxidant will reduce inflammation in your whole body. Reducing inflammation is another way to produce energy in the body. So teens, who want to have like hold a part-time job, play basketball, do all their schoolwork, and still have a smile on their face, like, and not be in bed, when it's time to do their chores, like energy metabolism and production is so important. So there's like that alone is like one good reason. Our body, like we have like 38 trillion cells, and like every day we turn over like 330 billion cells every day. We break down and rebuild these cells. So like every 8 days you get a new cell in your like lung alveoli, or like every month in your trachea. You like take that cell and you break it down and you rebuild it. So my question is like, if you don't want like errors in this process, then it's actually the nutrient, like, do you have enough nutrients to support this process, right? Every 8 years, you have an entirely new body. So every single day, and then the kids are growing. So there's even like more cell growth on top of that. If we want all these cells to like grow correctly and to function normally, then the nutrients are needed to like do these processes. I think it's extremely powerful, but like, so liver, kidney, spleen, heart, these are extremely nutrient dense. These are like the most nutrient dense foods on the planet. Other foods like tripe, you might say, oh, they don't have like a ton of, grains and sweetbreads are basically similar with like to seafoods and muscle meats with respect to nutrients. So they're like kind of balanced there, where the other ones have far more. And then things like tripe it doesn't look like they have enough nutrients when you put them side by side and compare it on the chart. But what you'll find is that tripe will have all the amino acids that are absolutely essential for, the literally essential amino acids that we need and that we need to consume for, all the neurotransmitters and also for, to balance all the muscle meats, right? There's like the glycine and everything for balancing muscle meats and like lowering homocysteine and things like that in our body. Anyway, all of them have, and the North Canadian Indians, like they told Weston Price that back then that, where they had no plant foods for 9 months out of the year, they said, how do you get vitamin C? How do you not get scurvy? After they asked the chief if they could, reveal this to Weston Price, they told him it was the adrenal glands and the second stomach of the ruminants, which is the honeycomb tripe. And by eating those foods, they were, that was a white man's disease because they knew how to remedy that illness and to keep it from coming into their community. And so, so even like tripe, we might think, oh, it doesn't have as many, but like this is, considered a hangover food in Mexico, for example, like a Sunday morning or Saturday morning meal of menudo, which is very rich in tripe. It has it does have all the B vitamins, just not in as high quantity as the liver. So these are extremely powerful foods, and they've been recognized through time for all those properties.
Yeah, I hope that, I know there's so many Americans that are struggling with chronic fatigue, chronic pain, inflammation, all these things. And really our diet can impact that so much. And so part of my hope in bringing you on and having people listen to you, like I have been listening to you for a while, is just to recognize that connection between what we eat and how we feel.
Absolutely.
And I know that like several years ago, I had some blood work done and I was, very mineral deficient, like in several areas. And that's when I started looking for, how can I remedy this? And of course, like eating more organ meats and stuff and trying to bring, I started with liver, trying to bring liver into our home and stuff like that. And, my daughter wasn't willing to jump on board. And so during that transition, I did buy some liver supplements for her. And, I don't think that's a bad option, but I do think you made a really good point earlier, is that when we're relying on supplements that, it's number one, expensive.
Yeah.
A lot more expensive than just eating the food. It's consuming because, there's really no end to that. Like you just have to take 10 pills a day for the rest of your life. I mean, that's
like where is
not
that
realistic. Yeah.
I also think that you miss out on the feedback. Like, don't get me wrong, supplements are a great path for some people. Some people are never going to do this work. That it's not in their wheelhouse to like use food as medicine and to like, just align their dinner with their values. Like, and in that case, like I still think supplements can help them. But if you but again, like the most sustainable way to create these, to get these nutrients is just creating meals that you love. I believe this. The other thing is that by eating the food, like digestion and absorption. Like if you want to absorb all these nutrients, absorption starts with chewing your food. It starts with enzyme and so like saliva production, enzymes breaking down the food. Like this is like the most powerful absorption we can get. And and also there's a feedback mechanism. You know, if you have a handful of salt and you're eating all this salt, at some point you're like, oh my God, like no more, right? Like I can't put any more on my tongue. I'm done. And I think that for a food as powerful and as nutrient dense as liver, I have experienced it myself, and I have seen it with all my kids. At some point they say, I am done. Like you push the plate away and like, I cannot have another bite. I will not have another bite. And like, I'm done. And gosh, there was times where I was like in my childbearing and nursing years, you know, I'd been growing people from scratch for 10 years where I was eating a lot of these foods, like far more than whatever guidelines may say, right? But just listening to my body. But at some point I would come to a place and I was relying on it for energy production. I was like, this is what keeps me going, right? I have 3 kids and I'm pregnant and, you know, I'm nursing and right. Like this was like how I was like getting through my day and just, I kind of still managing to have fun. Cause I have to say that I think that that's like a big differentiator for me, like pre-organ needs and after is like before I was like, am I ever going to have fun again? Like I'm so worn down with these kids. Like, I'm so broken. Like everything is hard. Everything felt hard and overwhelming in my life. But like organ meats, it's like, oh, I can do all the things I have to do. And like, we're still laughing in the kitchen, you know, like or laughing at bedtime or like, just
that's what we want.
House together. Yeah. Like that was like the biggest differentiator for me. It's like, it was like, well, now like we're still having fun. So it was like, now I'm eating these foods but there was a point where it's like, oh my gosh, like I don't want liver anymore. Right? Like, I'm done. Like I don't need that anymore. I'm done. So when you're not eating it, I think you do miss out on some of that feedback mechanism.
Yeah, it's all about quality of life, right? Like what quality of life do we want for ourselves and for our families, and what are we willing to try to make the sustainable changes to get there?
Yeah. But also it's just about fishing, you know, if it's about all these exposures of somebody in your home, it's like just relying on the supplements and then they see people eating these meals over and over and over again. At some point it's like, well, I guess I could try that. Like everybody else is eating that. It sounds so weird. You know, even normalizes for them. Yeah. Like the same way you watch me and then you're like, okay, somebody's like normalizing this. Like the same thing is going to happen to her by being in your home when everybody else is eating these foods. So I think it's like very powerful and a gift in a lot of ways.
Yeah. This is so good. Thank you, Janine. This is awesome.
Yeah.
So many good.
Thank you for having me. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to share about like my favorite thing to talk about.
Yes. Well, I always ask 3 questions at the end of every episode. And the first one is like, what healthy living resource would you recommend to people? So, I mean, if you have something that comes to mind, that's fine. But I would love for you to share about resources you have as well.
Yeah, well, that's what I was going to say. I have a blog that I started in 2017. It's called Awfully Good Cooking. 2 F's, 2 L's, OFFALLY, Awfully Good Cooking. I know it's like so corny. Now sometimes I like feel embarrassed. But
I love it.
But anyway, so that, I mean, I think I have somewhere between 90 and 100 recipes on that site at this point. And there's definitely more than 25 liver recipes alone. So if you're thinking that you could consider dabbling in this, like you can really find liver at most grocery stores. Like I said, they sell it at Whole Foods, they sell it at Safeway. It's really everywhere. Most natural grocery stores, Sprouts and Natural Grocers, things like that, they're all carrying it. You can definitely just, you know, there's so many different recipes on my site that are all in one place that you can like scroll through those and like find something that looks good and give it a try. So I would definitely encourage people to do that. I also have a free masterclass that I do pretty much once a month. And it's basically for cooking all the organ meats, like why we need these foods, kind of going through some of the nutrient stuff that we were talking about tonight, even if you think it's not for you, but like why your body is like craving these nutrients. And then, you know, my framework for how to cook all of the organ meats. So no matter what organ meats you want to dive into, like having a framework and understanding of like how to prepare them well, because they really are unfamiliar. We really, you know, I came to this with no understanding of this, only through trial and error over many years. I kind of like put together some frameworks and then, you know, like mindset hacks for getting started. So yeah, you can find that on my blog, Awfully Good Cooking. There's like a page for the Liver Lover Challenge and you can go there and there's a free masterclass. So if you want to get started. But
yeah, I think those are a treasure. Thank you for creating those. I'll make sure I post them in the show notes.
Awesome.
Yeah. Second question is, does your family have any healthy snacks that they love?
Healthy snacks that we love. What do we eat for snacks? I'm like a non-snacker. I'm like, no. Like, I'm always trying to shut down the snacks. Well, I mean, mostly we keep a lot of meat bars. Like I always have meat bars in my purse and stuff like that. Cans of sardines are in the console of the car with sporks. You know, like that's kind of what we do when we're out. Like, people need to pick me up. But you know, we do. My daughter recently found in the Bill Schindler book. I was like, okay, if you read this book, like you can bake anything you want from here. They're all sourdough recipes and stuff. And she found a recipe for sourdough pretzels, like German pretzels that are boiled and then baked with like, you know, a lot of like rock salt on them. So she's been making those. We've probably had them 3 or 4 times, and he makes like a big pretzel, but because we still have like my youngest is only 6. So she's been making like little miniature ones. And so those are like so fun having those pretzels in the house. They've been enjoying those. But again, like she has to do that work if they want those snacks. Like I'm not going to write those for them. So so that's been something we've been eating lately. But I think that all the Western fried snack foods, like sliced cheeses, sliced veggies.
Good way to get kids in the kitchen. If you want to actually need to make it.
Absolutely. Like I actually I used to cook everything from scratch, and I would ride my bike when we lived in Chicago. We lived close to downtown. I would ride my bike home at lunch, and I would like prep all the dinner, pick everyone up from daycare as I come home, like dinner, and then do all the prep that night, like all the soaking and preparing and stuff for the next day. It was just a production, but at some point I kind of was like, I prepare one hot meal a day. So like if it's eggs or something, I'll make that for you for breakfast. So that's like pretty simple. But like if you want a more like I'll do one hot meal a day. Otherwise it's like literally canned fish where you make your own. Yeah. They can like make their own ground beef. They can make their own taco meat. They can make, quesadillas, eggs. There's a lot of things they can do on their own. But I will do like one full hot meal in a day. And if I do it for lunch, then guess what? You're having canned fish for dinner.
Yes. I think a lot of moms are high-fiving you right now.
Yeah. So that's all I can do. I put in my time but the thing is they've grown up with real food, and so they've seen how to cook real food. Like my daughter actually roasted a chicken this morning because she wants to make a chicken pot pie. And again, like I'm so hands off I actually did so much baking when I was growing up. Northern California, we had so many fruit trees in my backyard. We had apple, 3 fig trees, 2 cherries, peach, plum, apricot, persimmon. We made so many pies. Like my mom's like an expert pie maker, and we would give them out to the people at the bank and the post office and the dry food. I mean, for everybody, because we had so much fruit in our backyard when I was growing up. My sister and I would be pitting cherries, like, until the sun came up, and for her to put in pies, for us to like go take around town and deliver. And then like she would bake cookies for like every holiday for all the teachers at school. Not like our teacher that year, like every teacher we'd ever had. It's like, we baked so much. And that was really a shift for me when I learned about Western Price, because I thought I was cooking everything from scratch, so I must be healthy, but I didn't realize that like sugar and flour were actually processed foods. I was just putting them into a food that I made at home and like thought it was healthy, right? But so I'm like my days of bake, like my mom, like with organ meats, I'm like, I don't bake, I don't do it. Yeah. So my daughter loves chicken pot pies. Like she wants to make chicken pot pie. I'm like, you make your sourdough pie crust, which she does, and she's got like some in the freezer because she'll make them sometimes even when she's bored if there's extra sourdough starter, but she's not. But anyway, today she wants to make a chicken pot pie for dinner. So she actually roasted a chicken this morning before.
Good for her.
So she could like make her own pie tonight. I'm like, that's fine, but I'm not.
I love that. Yes, that's awesome.
They're like, yeah, I just roast the chicken and that would be dinner. I'd like steam some green beans,
Right.
Like, no, I want this comprehensive thing. Yeah. But then, they've learned that, so they can do that. Anyway, that was sorry.
There's always a way to still eat foods you love. Yeah.
Absolutely. That's the thing about Sally Fallon, right? Is like find a way to make them accessible, because you can keep my kids were in a silo for many years, but at some point they go to birthday parties and soccer games and like all this stuff, and you have to be out in the world. And I remember for years, all my kids wanted in their school lunch was a sandwich. Like that's all they, right? And I was always giving them like leftover thermoses of like soup or like casseroles, or stews. Like all they wanted was a sandwich. And I'm like, this is the best lunch you could have. It's like, oh, you have your bone marrow, whatever. Like you have your just want a sandwich. So, I do think that there's a lot of just grace in the Western Price, like Sally Fallon, Weston A. Price Foundation, like way nourishing traditions, way of eating, because it's a way that you can serve a family dinner in a nutrient-dense way, like every night for 20 years. Yeah. So, and I have so much like respect and gratitude for Sally Fallon in that regard. Yeah, I totally agree. Like if you want nutrient-dense foods, like go carnivore, just eat animal foods, like great. But if you want your kids to like grow up in culture and like have relationships with your grandparents and like live in the world, like maybe Sally Fallon has some experience with that.
Agreed. Last question is, who would you love to see as a guest on the Daily Wellness Podcast?
Oh, that's a great question. Actually, there is a gentleman. I would have to look up his last name. His name, I know his first name is Bob, and he does a lot of like breathing and cold plunge and like resilience work in general. And I don't know, I've kind of been following him lately, and I think that he's got a lot of. I recently saw him post somewhere. It was like an old repost in his stories about doing this Memorial Day challenge where I don't remember exactly what it was. I don't know what the challenge, but I messaged him. I was like, "What is this?" And he's like, "Oh, it's a It's 100 pull-ups, like 200 push-ups, like running so far, all this stuff for this like yearly challenge. And he was doing it all with the mouth tape, like breathing through his nose for this entire workout. I was like, okay, you're hardcore. Like you were super strong.
Yes.
So anyway, I was impressed. I can give you his name. I don't know exactly what it is. I know.
Yeah. Message it to me and I'll put it in for everybody.
Yeah. But I was like, wow, that's some serious strength and resilience. I feel pretty strong. Like I swing kettlebells. I do plunges in my icy river. I feel like we live in this like robust mountain climate and we're outside a lot, but like, wow, that's a whole other level. Like,
yes,
that guy's rocking it. So yeah, I was like, there's something to be learned there about like breath work and just mind over engaging your mind and your breath to calm your nervous system and to utilize that for strength and resilience in the world. I thought that was cool.
Yeah. And good.
Thanks for asking.
Another take on holistic health, just thinking about other aspects.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it is tangential. Like certainly I've done breathing things or meditation things and cold things and all that, but it's like, wow, that's like tangential to like my focus in the world, which is really like nutrient-dense food. So I just thought that was cool.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. Yeah.
I appreciate your time and your wisdom and the impact that you're having on me and so many others.
Awesome.
Thanks for listening to today's episode on the Daily Wellness Podcast. We hope that you found it helpful for your own wellness journey. And if so, we'd love for you to leave a review. Then come back and listen for review shoutouts on upcoming episodes. For more information, check out the show notes and connect with us on our website, dailywellnesscommunity.com.